Welcome, everybody. Day 68. I think I saw yesterday on the day 67 video, there's a comment that's something like, oh wow, 67 days. Maybe I should do something similar. And that's exactly the point of this series, to try and motivate people to think about art in that way. If this is your first time here, my name is Angela Wren, and this is a everyday art series that I'm doing where I'm documenting my kind of process and growth as an artist. Right now, by popular demand, we're in the middle of what we're calling Anatomy Month, which is that we're going to spend the entire month of January learning about human anatomy. And so we're going to talk about a lot of different ideas on how to practice, different exercises, different approaches that we can take. But the first idea that we talked about was this idea of chunking. And so what chunking is it's this idea of breaking down a concept, like a large concept, like the anatomy of the entire human body, and breaking it into more manageable pieces. So the way that we're going to approach this month is this first week, we're actually going to focus just on the front of the torso and the front of the neck. The second week will be just the back of the torso and the back of the neck. The third week will be the legs, and we'll do the front and back of the legs. So that will include like the front of the pelvis and the glutes. And then the last week we'll focus on the arms, and then hopefully have a couple days where we can pull it all together and think about the human anatomy as a whole. Today what we're doing is we're actually drawing the profile view of the front anatomy of the body. So a little bit of the back anatomy will kind of sneak in here, but that's okay. It's not a big deal. What we really want to try and do, since yesterday we did this like front view of the torso, we want to then understand the side view and see how all of these structures fit together. And so I went into in depth yesterday how I'm doing these drawings, in the sense of like, what is the mental connection that I'm trying to build as I'm doing this drawing. I'm not just copying what I'm seeing and just kind of going through the process and going through the motions of drawing. I'm trying to be really, really cognizant of thinking about each individual piece of anatomy and each of the muscles, almost like they're Lego blocks, and trying to understand how do these fit together to construct the figure as a whole. With that being said, I think I'll let the time lapse kind of play out, and I'll do a little bit of a voiceover talking a little more about what I'm thinking about, as well as what the future plans for the rest of this week will be, and what types of exercises we might think about doing, as well as like what I'm thinking about while I'm drawing. As noted on the screen, this reference actually comes from the artist Valerie Winslow, who put together this incredible textbook on human anatomy for artists. I found a copy of this textbook, open source, online, and a link to it can be found in the description below. As I mentioned in the introduction, I'm trying to be really deliberate about thinking about the pieces of the anatomy and the muscles as Lego blocks that build together the figure. So you can see I just sketched in all of these different parts of the deltoid and this first part of the arm that is visible in the reference. And I tried to think of each of these three pieces as coming together to form this whole form. So for example, on the deltoid, you have the front part of the deltoid, the middle part, and then the back. And each of these has kind of unique connection points with where they sit on the body and where they are in relation to things like the head, things like the chest, and even things that are lower down in the body that we're not fully studying here, like the pelvis. To me, the real way to practice anatomy is to be incredibly mindful while you're drawing.
I'm often trying to draw a little bit from imagination without even really looking at the reference, just to see if I can get a basic understanding of anatomy and how things sit on the body. And then I check my work against the reference itself. It's also a nice idea to use your own body as a reference and kind of think about how each of these muscles exist in 3D space. You might even move your arm around a little bit to see how that affects the pectoral muscles, or shift your body from side to side to see how the obliques and the abs stretch and pinch. At this point in the drawing, I'm beginning to clean up some of the line work, but what I was also doing was checking horizontally between the two images. So how do things on the profile view line up with things on the front view? And you can see I even go back in and start editing the front view a little bit to have them line up a little more closely. Even though we're practicing this idea of chunking and starting first by only looking at the front of the torso anatomy, it's important to remember that no piece of anatomy on the human body exists by itself. And to study a piece of anatomy without thinking about how it exists in relation to other parts of the body is to do a disservice to yourself and to the study of anatomy. At this point, I begin labeling the muscles that I see on the figure. And something that I do that I would recommend you try is to first try and label the muscles without looking at the reference. If you've been very mindful about your drawing and thinking about each of these different muscles and elements of anatomy, this should actually come very naturally. Likewise, I also have the profile view as a reference to try and find other labels that I might not be able to identify. Only once I've finished and I can't think of identifying any other elements, then I will look at the reference and check my work. At this point, my goal in my study is to really have internalized and memorized all of the different muscles that exist on the front of the torso. It's okay if in the future I forget muscles and need to come back to them, but the idea is that nothing should be a surprise anymore. I now have an understanding of all of the muscles that exist, and I can move forward with my study from there.